This is one of the most insane historical crime stories that I've ever heard, and I just can't believe I just learned about this now. Okay, imagine this. A group of Native Americans are colonized and cast away from their land, and they're pushed into this area, this one piece of land that basically the colonizers deemed as like this rocky, worthless rocky terrain. And then the Native Americans, known as the Osage people, discover liquid black gold, aka oil, and they become the richest people in the country at one point. And then the white man and the colonizers are traveling to this part of Oklahoma to work for the Native Americans who are now filthy rich. Yes, this is a true story, now turned into a Martin Scorsese directed film called Killers of the Flower Moon. So as you'd expect, the outsiders are naturally envious of the Osage wealth. They cast them away to this piece of land, and they didn't have to do anything, and they stumbled across essentially a gold mine that made them so rich. And because they were cast away here legally, this land was rightfully theirs. However, and there's always a however, and there's always a but, there were legalities set in place that made the Osage people extremely vulnerable to exploitation and corruption, making this money a huge double-edged sword. So essentially, the US Congress passed this law requiring anyone who's full or half-blood Osage to have white guardians to oversee the management of their wealth. This means that the Osage people had to get approval from a white guardian for their own expenses and their own financial affairs. Basically, they were viewed as these incompetent Indians, and it was a very discriminatory law that made them very vulnerable. These white guardianships became a means for the whites to exploit the Osage and gain control over their wealth. This was in the 1920s, and during this period, a whole bunch of Osage women started marrying white men because in their mind, well, who better to help me manage my finances other than my own spouse? But then a string of mysterious murders started happening. It was clear that much of these murders were committed in order for some whites to take over the head rights of the Osage members when inheriting their property after their death. There was a very calculated and manipulative man named William Hale who was so respected. He was like known as like the friend of the Osage people, and him and his nephew, along with several other minions and conspirators, they were under great suspicion as more and more bodies started turning up. So Ernest, who's William Hale's nephew, was married to an Osage woman named Molly. Throughout the story, Molly is slowly but surely surrounded by grief and loss and tragedy and the greatest betrayals that you can ever imagine. This is the gist of the story. And I don't want to get too much into the content because I do recommend you go watch the movie. It's very well made. This is what I have to say about the film. What Martin Scorsese seems to understand about lengthy films is that each minute has to be honored with a very good harmony between subtlety and engagement, rather than a constant overstimulation. For example, while both the lengthy films of Babylon and Beau is Afraid were visually exciting and filled with action, I personally found the storytelling to be overshadowed by an overwhelming and relentless stream of events. The focus of those movies seemed to be way more on a sensory overload rather than developing a coherent and engaging narrative. But Killers of the Flower Moon, around 3.5 hours long, and it just did a fantastic job at driving forth powerful storytelling. It had a perfect balance between subtle and intense, and it conveyed a deeply dark, complex crime story full of a web of lies in such a skillful way, without exploiting the story for pure entertainment. The film paid tribute to the victims. It effectively portrayed their grief, all while narrating the story from the perspective of the killers. Just achieving that balance is truly a challenging feat, and I really respect Scorsese for being able to pull that off. And the movie conveyed the true evil that came from William Hale and all of his conspirators and his little minions, and it did a great job conveying the unjustified actions against the Osage people. Robert De Niro's performance as William Hale is arguably one of the best I've seen, but it's no surprise that he did an incredible job considering it's Robert De Niro. A lot of little details were incorporated into his character that I just absolutely love. For example, in some of his darkest and most sinister moments, we saw a recurring motif of noticeable reflections on his glasses. I interpreted those reflections represented moments of deception and duplicity, as well as manipulation. Also, in some moments, I felt like it also represented control and power, especially in a scene. If you haven't seen the movie, there's a Freemason scene, especially in that scene. His character also at times resembled an owl, and certain pieces of his wardrobe seemed like it was symbolizing an owl. Seeing an owl actually represented the idea that death is near, so I found it kind of interesting how there was a bit of a parallel there. His performance contained elements that were truly just harrowing and captivating. The person who once committed these crimes was clearly evil and deranged, and De Niro was able to capture that for us perfectly on screen. Leonardo never fails to impress me. I definitely have a bias there because he is my favorite actor, but the way he completely transforms himself into the exact character that he plays, I personally loved this version of him because he plays a complete idiot, and I found it kind of fun to watch because he's usually very dashing. It's an interesting performance to see from DiCaprio. But in all seriousness, his performance as Ernest Burkhart was captivating, convincing, and he displayed many layered reactions while committing his crimes and also handling his manipulative uncle. Leonardo is more of a method actor, and his style, in my opinion, seems to be more of like the drama and the expressiveness. I found that the drama and expressiveness, this style of acting, was more complementary to the other character styles, which were more subtle and like intrinsic. Even though Leonardo was the protagonist, I found his style was still more complementary to the others, and that those other performances really shined. And so although Leonardo and Robert De Niro played these roles immaculately, the performance that I admired the most was certainly Lily Gladstone's. Lily conveyed her talent through classical acting. She carried her character with poise. She was subtle, she was calm, she evoked the most emotion out of me. Her character's reactions, they were raw, they were gentle, they were emotional, they were powerful. I really hope Lily grows more and more popular in Hollywood following this performance, and I honestly don't believe anyone could have played this role better than her. Overall, I'm so thankful that Scorsese decided to direct a movie about this story. So many people are gonna learn about the atrocities and injustices that happened to the Osage people. People are gonna learn about the greed and the evil and the corruption that flowed through the veins of William Hale and his minions and Ernest Burkhart. I shouldn't be surprised, but I was pretty shocked by how much complicit behavior was shown by so many people throughout this time. The one and only thing that I wish was better communicated, and it very well could have, and maybe I just missed it, I wish it was conveyed more clearly why a lot of the Osage women were marrying the white man and the colonizer. I feel like if William Hale's character was to directly reference the law about white guardianship, it would have helped us understand a lot more, or like it just be mentioned in the movie a little bit more clearly. I don't know, maybe it was, maybe I missed it honestly, because it would have really helped for us to understand what was preventing the natives from accessing their own wealth. Anyways, that's my review today. Thank you guys for tuning in. I thoroughly enjoyed the film, and I usually strongly oppose lengthy films, and I never watch them in theaters, but I really did like this one. Thank you guys for tuning in today. If you guys enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe, and you can also follow me at my socials over here. Bye!